again. I'm just going to put that there. So this presentation is about media for arts and literature, and I thought I'd start by explaining a little bit about how I see how it breaks down, and then I'm going to take you through some quick reads media coverage and explain the different bits of it and how we got it and what I think about it. And I'm following the same principle as I did in my earlier presentation, that by explaining what it is that I do and kind of commenting, doing a commentary on how it is that we do it, that hopefully it's useful and gives some other lessons. And as I said, I've only been working at Quick Read since April, and before that I spent 10 years working for Waterstones. And quite a lot of the work I did for Waterstones, especially at the end, was around PR and being a spokesperson for Waterstones and organising events and speaking about book events. So I have quite a lot of experience of doing that. And then I also, because my job at Quick Reads is part-time, theoretically, it's 3 days a week. Of course, I'm always doing extra work. But then I also write for The Bookseller, which is a weekly magazine which serves bookselling and publishing industries in the UK. And I write about new fiction for that, so all the new books that are published. And I do a radio book club. So I look at this from various different angles, and I look at it all. All for me comes under the umbrella of talking to strangers about books. So to think about media, and everything has changed really and developed with media, because the rise of social media has really changed the ways in which it's possible to communicate with people. And I only learnt this way of looking at it very recently. Somebody from a PR company told me this, and it really helped crystallise things for me, so I thought I would share it with you. And it's the distinction between bought media, earned media, and owned media. So bought media is something that you have to pay for. So it would be an advertisement. So if you were setting up a literature festival and you wanted to advertise in the newspaper, and you would pay for that advertisement. And that's bought media. It's very straightforward. Everybody understands what it is. You pay a certain amount of money and you get a certain amount of space in a newspaper that advertises your event. Earned media is what we would traditionally think of as PR, public relations. It's when you encourage a newspaper or a television programme to run a feature about you by providing them with something interesting to write about. And then owned media is the new one. That's what you can yourself own, and that's what social media allows you to do as an organisation. You can have your own media channels. So after those three distinctions, and then I'll talk more about how this beds down for us as I go through the examples, I thought it was also interesting just to look very basically at what the different channels are and what they do. So obviously there's TV, radio, newspapers and magazines, and they're all doing news, interviews, reviews, discussions, book clubs, and those are all various ways in which your event or your books might be featured. And then the interesting thing of social media is that they can do all those things, but also where it's often very useful, it's about it can share all those things. And it adds a level of complexity, I think a very pleasing level of complexity, to the earned media. So you may have a piece of traditional PR, that you may have an interview with your spokesperson in the newspaper, but what you can then do is you can use all your own media channels to further publicise that piece of earned media. So you use your own media to build on your earned media. So And I know lots of you probably won't be able to read this, but hopefully it sort of makes sense by the way that it looks. What's up there is various different articles in what we would call the trade press. And that means the press that's most directly talking to the people that I need to reach. It's not consumer, it's trade press. So it is the bookseller, something else that's called the grocer, and various trade magazines. And what we're doing in that one is we're talking directly to the people who I expect to be aware that we already exist. So it's sort of our heartland. So we would talk to them in a particular way. And in a lot of those articles, I'm thanking them for their support of us over the last 7 years and asking them to carry on. Because they're the people, I'm trying to encourage those people, this audience, to think of us as working together to create a different aim. These articles are sort of beginning to get towards the idea of an op-ed, an opinion or editorial-based piece. And these articles, some of them are in the Guardian, are actually about literacy. So there's an interview with me about literacy in prisons and why I find it interesting and why it's socially important. Can you see there's a picture of me down on the left-hand side? Sort of like this. Somebody emailed me when that was published and said, it's very Obama. But that was a really useful piece for us because it was in The Independent, which is a major UK newspaper, and lots of people saw it. So lots of important and influential people who I was already in contact with emailed me to say, well done, I see you're doing lots of good work, I often talk about you in the project. So people that were already helping us were reinforced by their help, by seeing that piece in the newspaper. And this is what we call consumer PR. So this is the idea that we're actually trying to reach some of the people that we hope would use our books. And to do that, we're using a different type of media. And the way we manage to engage this different type of media, which is television shows. So I wouldn't expect you to know, but up there, that says Lorraine. That's a television chat show that is extremely popular. It's on in the mornings. And whilst it would be nice to think that they would like to invite me to talk to them about literacy in prisons for a long time on their sofa, we also realistically knew that that wouldn't actually be interesting enough alone for them. So the reason why we got lots of this really brilliant coverage, this consumer coverage in consumer-facing television and magazines, was that we had a celebrity ambassador. And again, you may not be aware of her in Korea, but the very pretty girl in the pictures is called Cara Taunton, and she's an actress. She's a UK actress. She's very famous. But she's also very brilliant as an ambassador for Quick Reads because she is dyslexic. And this was in her, she was very lucky. She'll say that she was very lucky because she was diagnosed when she was 7 and she got lots of help. And that means that she's very happy to campaign for us. And she spreads the message very well because she explains to people that she was lucky, she was diagnosed when she was 7. What Quick Reads is often doing is trying to help the people who didn't get the diagnosis. A lot of the people we're trying to help at Quick Reads are the people who didn't get an intervention. They didn't get a sympathetic teacher. They didn't get an inspirational librarian. They didn't have an understanding social worker. And they possibly didn't have attentive parenting. And the fact that we, by using Cara, this very brilliant, beautiful, appealing actress who TV shows want her on their sofa, on their chat shows, we were able to take this very harsh message into very popular territory. further down there, the man in the shadows, he's in the shadows on purpose. His name is Andy McNair. He's a very famous British writer, and he was in the army. And he wrote a book called Bravo 20, which is about how he was captured in Iraq and Afghanistan and didn't think he would live and was tortured quite horribly. He also has a very interesting life, a very sad life to an extent, because he was abandoned as a baby. He was found in a carrier bag, and he grew up and was often in trouble. And he went to Borstal, which is a young person's prison, and was recruited into the army from prison. And then one day, the army educator, the army teacher, came round, and it was the day that changed his life, and said to him, "You're not thick," which is stupid, "you're not thick, you're just not educated." And it was the first time he realised that education could be for him. And he began to learn to read and write. Then he was in the army, then he was captured, and then eventually he started to write books about his experience and has become very famous. And he now he writes films. He's a very inspirational speaker, and it's a privilege to spend time with him. But because his story is so dramatic and he connects with people so well, so he can talk to a room of, say, prisoners very naturally. But also, because his story is so dramatic and he's so good at it, the media find him very interesting. The reason why his face is in the shadow is because when he was in the army, he did lots of secret things. So he still can't be identified. On the one hand, that makes it difficult to do media, because you can't have him on television, but it also adds a sense of excitement. And so this was in a major consumer newspaper called The People in the UK, a big interview with him talking about literacy and how important it is and how learning to read changed his life, and with his face all shadowed over. So we were very lucky to have him. He's one of our authors, and his book is all about his experience and how learning to read changed everything for him. So that's an example of how if you have a really powerful story, you can then use it to get further traction and coverage. These are more consumer pieces. The man in the photographs is Simon Koenig, who's another one of our authors. And he also has a very interesting and difficult story, because he was held up when he was younger and thought for a time that it was all going to go horribly wrong. And he talks about it very convincingly. And I think his books are very frightening, and I wonder whether he is able to write about fear so well because he's really felt it. But again, it's a very interesting story, and it adds another interesting dimension that the media are interested in. So they were interested in doing those pieces. The one up there on the left says that 1 in 4 UK adults don't read for pleasure. So the story behind that headline is that one of the things we did was we commissioned some research. And we commissioned some research from some of those academics I was talking about earlier on, the Institute of Education. And then from this research, we thought about things, what headlines people would find interesting. And then we got lots of news articles about that headline. And then that enabled us again to broaden the discussion. Quite often when I think about how you get your message into the media, it needs to be something interesting. So what might be interesting to you might be more difficult to get somebody else to find interesting. So you have to work out how you can pique their interest and then move it onto the subjects that you do really want to talk about. This is more consumer PR, and again, lots of women's magazines and chat magazines. And these ones are all using a combination of Cara, our celebrity ambassador, of the research story, and of marketing images and pictures of the books. A really simple thing, but it's really important. And there's been times before when I've done things and I haven't realised this, is to always just make it incredibly easy for journalists. So we have all our marketing material downloadable on our website. And we make sure that the images won't be too big for people to use. Because we just understand that everybody's very likely to be on a deadline. So if you make it difficult for somebody to get something, they probably won't ask the question again, they just won't use it. So it's really worth thinking, again, if you were having a festival, it's really worth making sure that all your design logos exist in a small format. That might be really obvious, I'm not sure, but I just know, I know of loads of cases where something has gone wrong for someone because somebody hasn't been able to download or open the design file. And it's practical in itself, but also I think it's quite a useful metaphor to think about how you have your big picture idea of what you want to happen, and quite often it's in the nitty-gritty details that it can derail if it doesn't work. So you have to make sure the whole process works well for people to want to take it up. And this is regional press, and regional press in the UK is really interesting because people like to have a regional angle. One of the things we did, I'm obviously showing you images of a lot of newspapers and TV because they're easy to image, but we did a lot of radio. And the way we did this is that Cara and I sat in a studio room in London, and we were patched through 5 minutes at a time to different radio stations all over the country. And to do things like that, it's really useful to have a local angle. So I knew where all the authors came from, and if there was a local connection with the authors. I've lived in lots of bits of the country, so it's always really interesting to be able to tell the presenter that you used to live there, or that you know something about the area. Anything that makes it special for people makes them more inclined to feel an interest in you, and it's really worth doing some work around. What we also did with our research is we managed to break it down regionally. So we were able to say to somebody in Birmingham, this is the situation in your area and how it compares to the national average. And doing that little bit of extra groundwork meant we got a much better success rate from our regional press. And then moving into social media territory, there are a lot of book bloggers in the UK. I don't know if this is something that exists in Korea. One of the things that people are nodding at me, yes, so yes, that's good to know. One of the things I find very fascinating about blogging and social media is I genuinely find it quite democratizing. So before social media, if you wanted to have an opinion about a book, then and that was going to be in print, then a literary editor, an important person, usually a man, though I'm not going to get into feminist territory here. An important person would have to commission you to write about it. So that, and you had to, for that to happen, you had to be part of the establishment. Whereas now, with social media, sort of anybody can have an opinion, and if their opinion is good enough, then people will become interested in that opinion, and it will grow. And that's really how book blogging comes about. And one of the things that we did that I'm really pleased about in our campaign was I had a social media volunteer. And this is a girl called, slightly confusingly, the same name as our celebrity ambassador, but a different Cara. And I knew her from my days at Waterstones. She works in a bookshop, but she also is a book blogger herself, and she uses Twitter. So, and she's interested in publishing. So I asked her if she wanted to, I was talking to her, and she said she wanted to do some work experience, possibly in a publisher's. So I said, come and spend the launch week with me. And this was her idea, was to contact book bloggers and offer to send them books, but also, again, to make our marketing material available to them. So as you can see there, and I think we're up to about 35 more online articles about quick reads by contacting the bloggers. And what I am most happy about is that we got a big volume of hits, but also I really felt that they all understood the messaging. I really felt people really understood what it was we were trying to do. And that whole piece of communication worked really well. And by using Cara, who is a book blogger and understands properly how it works, again, it just meant that the whole thing had a very nice, consensual atmosphere to it. I didn't feel we were pushing out a pitch at people. I felt we were engaging them in our project and that they felt pleased to be involved. There's another page there, and again we varied the material, so as people came back and were interested, we offered them Q&A sessions with me. We did some podcasts. We said, if you've got any ideas, let us know, and we made sure there was lots of material for them to do things with. We gave them some books to give away as well, so we could do blog giveaways, and it was really successful, but it was also really enjoyable, and in the same way as how I talked about the collaboration earlier on, I found it was raising my energy to feel that more people were involved in the project. It wasn't just being a success, it was making me feel happy to have more voices joined to our voice and to sort of have a concert effect rather than feeling like a lone voice. And then, of course, social media. So we use Facebook, and Facebook and Twitter are very interesting because they behave in entirely different ways, which is, again, too long for me to go into here. I've actually reached the point personally where I don't really like Facebook anymore. I only use it to post pictures of my child so that relatives that live in other countries can see how he's doing. You know, oh look, there's the child under a tree, that's nice. And I don't really use it to communicate anymore. But I am really obsessed with Twitter. And I think that Twitter lends itself to books and talking about books particularly well. And I find now that on the weekend, I still enjoy reading a whole newspaper, but I'm more likely to use Twitter to curate the weekend's news offerings for me, because I'll read the reviews that my friends, and when I say friends, I mean that very loosely, my Twitter friends, the people who I trust on Twitter, who are a real range of people, and they may be people I know in real life, but they may not be. And I'm interested in, I think that Twitter and books, I think Twitter it offers a whole new way of talking about books that didn't exist before, and I think it's potentially very creative and also very collaborative and really works for me as a space. And what we've got up there is we've got Andy McNabb and Veronica Henry and Kathy Lett, who are our authors. So we've got our authors tweeting about the campaign. And whilst I'm very proud of everything about Quick Reads, I still don't feel our social media is limited to a certain extent, because a lot of the people that we're trying to reach will have quite low digital literacy, as well as low literacy. And that doesn't in any way stop us. It just means I think we have to be realistic about what we can achieve. Personally as well, I find it a bit depressing when people measure success in terms of follower numbers or likes, because I just think that's a little bit boring. But if you wanted to look at a UK books thing that I think does social media extremely well, I'd like to recommend World Book Night to you, who I spoke about earlier. And I think that the way that World Book Night uses Twitter to really spread a love of reading amongst mainly people who are already very literate and create communities in which people share with each other, I think is really impressive and very pleasant and very enjoyable. That's why they're good at it, because it's just enjoyable. My personal feeling about Twitter is that if you feel a purpose behind it, you're no longer interested. It has to be organic and natural and pleasant. Name cards. So this is a confession and hopefully a solution. Despite reading in my very helpful notes from the British Council how important it was to carry a name card in Korea, I forgot mine. I remembered the chocolate, I remembered my passport, but I forgot my name cards, which are quite pretty and all sitting at home. So what I've done, because I'm genuinely approachable and would like to hear from anybody, so I've transcribed the important information from my name card up there. So that's my email address. The second one, Kathy Reads Books, is Twitter. And as I said, I'm quite obsessed with that, so would love to hear from anybody on Twitter. That's my personal one. And then the one below, @_Quick Reads, is the Quick Reads one. The Quick Reads one is run by Cara and is more based around what we do. And my Twitter, as I say in my Twitter biography, I can't remember exactly how I put it, but I put something like mainly books, but with a smattering of domestica. So it's mainly about what I'm reading, and then a little bit of, oh no, I've got to do the ironing. I try and keep the ironing to a minimum, but it creeps in. So that's how to find me. I hope that was a useful look about how we view the campaign, and I think that the thing now about whatever you're doing and whatever your budgets are and whatever your assets are, that the social media element is democratising and also enabling to people working on a smaller scale. And you can also make it quite local. So one of the really nice partnerships that happened in Quick Reads was through a library in Southend, which is a very small town. But the local library and the local Waterstones bookshop joined together, and with the local football team as well. And then they had a Quick Reads launch. And then they talked about this on Twitter. And then because we could see them talking about it, we then promoted it on Twitter and on our Facebook. And then because on the radio day, I was talking to BBC Radio Essex, I was able to say, and can I talk about Southend? And the librarian in Southend is called Simon, and he's on Twitter as @returnedtoday. And the thing I like about Twitter is that it does enable that in this room in Korea, I can talk about a man called Simon in Essex, in England. And there is a possibility that that connection can be made. So, thank you very much.